The amber glow of Kepler 442b's twin suns painted the research outpost in warm hues, as Dr. Marcus Chen methodically arranged his equipment outside the perimeter fence. The portable seismic sensors, motion detectors, and fabrication units formed, neat rows across the makeshift workbench he'd constructed from salvaged landing pod materials. "You cannot be serious," hissed Veltar, the Zephyrian liaison whose serpentine form coiled nervously near the shelter's entrance. Her scaled hide rippled with the deep purples and crimsons that indicated extreme agitation among her species. The Night Stalkers emerge when the sun set. Nothing survives the dark hours outside the barriers. Commander Sarah Mitchell emerged from the main habitat, her weathered face creased with concern. She'd led 17 colonial expeditions across the outer rim, but even her experience couldn't mask the worry in her steel-gray eyes. "Marcus, I've seen what's left after a Night Stalker feeding. The indigenous Zephyrians have 15-meter-tall energy barriers powered by their capital city's fusion core, and they still lose colonists to those things." Marcus continued his work, fingers dancing across the holographic interface of his trap-crafting system. The device hummed quietly as it assembled his first creation, a seemingly simple pressure plate disguised as natural stone. "The barriers work by keeping everything out," he said without looking up. "I prefer a more selective approach." Veltar's chromatophores flashed warning colors. "Selective? Human Marcus? These creatures can leap 40 meters vertically, smell fear from 5 kilometers away, and their claws can slice through titanium steel composites. They hunt in coordinated packs of up to 30 individuals, each the size of your Earth elephants, but with the speed of cheetahs." "Fascinating," Marcus murmured, making notes on his tablet. "Pack hunters with enhanced sensory capabilities and remarkable physical prowess. Tell me, do they rely primarily on scent tracking, or do they use echolocation like Earth bats?" The commander crossed her arms. "This isn't a research project, Chen. We're talking about survival. The Zephyrians have centuries of experience with these predators, and their solution is simple. Don't be outside when darkness falls." Marcus finally looked up, his brown eyes bright with the enthusiasm that had made him both famous and notorious in xenobiology circles. "Commander, with respect, their solution is adequate for their technology level and risk tolerance, but I'm not Zephyrian." He gestured toward the alien landscape beyond the outpost, where bioluminescent fungi created an otherworldly forest that stretched to the horizon. "This ecosystem represents the perfect testing ground for adaptive defensive systems." "Testing ground?" Veltar's voice reached a pitch that made the universal translator crackle. "This is madness!" The research team from Proxima Colony lasted exactly 43 minutes after sunset. "We found pieces scattered across 2 kilometers of forest floor." "Because they ran," Marcus replied calmly, activating another fabrication sequence. "Fear makes prey predictable." "But I'm not prey, Veltar. I'm an engineer." As the first sun began its descent toward the alien horizon, casting long shadows across the crystalline mountains in the distance, Marcus hefted a backpack filled with completed devices. Each trap represented hours of careful design, incorporating everything he'd learned about Kepler 442b's unique physics. The high oxygen atmosphere that made combustion reactions more volatile, the magnetic field fluctuations that affected electronics, and the dense plant life that could be weaponized by someone who understood botanical chemistry. "One night," he announced, heading toward the forest. "Give me one night to prove that human ingenuity trumps alien evolution." Commander Mitchell's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. "Marcus, that's a direct order. Stand down." He paused. At the tree line, where massive ferns with metallic blue fronds created a natural archway into the deeper forest. "Sarah, you've known me for 6 years. When have I ever made a claim I couldn't back up?" Before she could answer, he disappeared into the alien wilderness, leaving behind only the soft hum of activated devices and the fading echo of confident footsteps. The approaching darkness seemed to swallow him whole, while somewhere in the distance, the first haunting calls of the night stalkers began to echo through the trees. 2 hours before sunset, Marcus had transformed a small clearing 3 kilometers from the outpost into something that resembled a cross between a military fire base and a mad scientist's laboratory. Ancient Kepler trees, their phosphorescent bark casting ethereal blue light, formed natural pillars around his chosen position. He'd selected this spot carefully, elevated enough to provide good sight lines, but surrounded by dense vegetation that would channel approaching predators through predictable pathways. The first ring of defenses lay 200 meters out. Motion-activated scent dispersers. Marcus had synthesized the compounds during his 3-week observation period, identifying pheromones that triggered territorial disputes among local herbivores. When night stalkers approached, they'd encounter the chemical signatures of a dozen different species locked in apparent combat, creating confusion about what exactly they were hunting. Psychological warfare, he muttered, checking the activation sensors. Make them question their own senses. The second ring, at 100 meters, consisted of what he called perspective traps. Using the planet's unique gravitational lensing, effects caused by deposits of exotic matter in the subsurface, he'd positioned mirrors and light-bending crystals to create false images. Approaching predators would see multiple copies of their target, each appearing to move independently, through impossible spatial coordinates. Closer in, at 50 meters, the defensive systems became more aggressive. Pitfall traps lined the natural game trails, but these weren't simple holes. Each contained a specific cocktail of local plant extracts, paralytic agents from the razor moss, disorienting hallucinogens from crimson bell fungi, and synthetic pheromones that would mark any creature unfortunate enough to fall in as diseased and untouchable to its packmates. The inner perimeter showcased Marcus's most sophisticated work. Kinetic interceptors, essentially railgun projectiles powered by the planet's electromagnetic fluctuations, lay disguised as fallen logs and scattered rocks. Motion sensors would track incoming threats and calculate precise intercept trajectories, launching tungsten penetrators at hypersonic velocities. But even these weapons served a dual purpose. The electromagnetic pulse generated by each firing would disrupt the bioelectric fields that night stalkers used for communication. At the center of it all sat Marcus himself, surrounded by a final ring of defensive measures that demonstrated his deep understanding of predator psychology. Instead of hiding, he'd made himself highly visible, sitting calmly beside a small campfire while apparently absorbed in reading a book. To any watching predator, he appeared completely vulnerable, the perfect trap for creatures that had evolved to exploit overconfidence. His personal protection consisted of a proximity suit woven with conductive fibers that could deliver stunning electrical charges, emergency smoke dispensers loaded with concentrated capsaicin extract, and a neural feedback system that would allow him to manually trigger any of his outer defensive rings if the automated systems failed. But perhaps most importantly, he'd spent weeks studying night stalker hunting patterns through remote sensors. These weren't mindless beasts. They were intelligent pack predators with complex social hierarchies and learned behaviors. They tested new environments carefully, sent scouts ahead of the main force, and adapted their tactics based on previous encounters. Marcus had designed his entire system around that intelligence. As the twin suns touched the horizon and the forest began its nightly transformation, bioluminescent plants awakened in cascades of blue and green light. The temperature dropped 15 degrees in minutes, and the air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, a sound like grinding metal echoed between the trees, the first night stalker calls of the evening. Marcus turned. A page in his book, a treatise on comparative xenobiology, and checked his tablet display. All systems showed green. The trap network was armed and ready, its sensors painting a three-dimensional map of the surrounding forest in real time. He'd told Commander Mitchell that human ingenuity could triumph over alien evolution. Now, as the last traces of sunlight faded and the true darkness of Kepler 442b descended, it was time to prove that claim. The silence lasted exactly 47 minutes after full darkness fell. Marcus had been counting, his internal chronometer synchronized with the planet's unusual rotational period. When the first probe finally came, it arrived with the whisper-soft sound of displaced air and the faintest trace of predator musk. His peripheral sensors detected it first, a heat signature moving through the canopy 60 meters above ground level. The Night Stalker scout was using the interconnected branch network, an intelligent approach that avoided ground-level traps. But Marcus had anticipated arboreal reconnaissance. The creature triggered his first surprise at 55 meters altitude. Crystalline wind chimes laced with synthetic alarm pheromones from a dozen different prey species. The sudden cacophony of chemical signals created sensory overflow, forcing the scout to descend for clearer atmospheric readings. As it dropped to 30 meters, infrared lasers painted targeting solutions while motion sensors tracked its movement pattern. The Night Stalker was magnificent, 3 meters at the shoulder, rippling with bioluminescent threat displays, its 6 limbs ending in retractable claws that could indeed slice titanium. Its head swiveled with predator grace, testing wind currents and electromagnetic signatures. Marcus remained motionless beside his campfire, apparently oblivious to the creature now circling his position. The scout completed 2 full reconnaissance passes, its pack communication organs pulsing with subsonic frequencies that would normally coordinate hunting strategies, but Marcus's interference system was already working. Every time the scout attempted to send location data to its pack, electromagnetic pulse generators disguised as rocks created static bursts across the communication frequencies. To the waiting Night Stalkers, their scout had simply vanished into a dead zone. The scout's behavioral pattern shifted to investigation mode. It descended to ground level, moving with liquid grace through the outer defensive rings. The scent dispersers activated as programmed, flooding the area with territorial markings from 6 different herbivore species. The Night Stalker paused, nostrils flaring, processing the conflicting chemical information. It stepped directly into the perspective trap field. From the creature's viewpoint, the single human by the fire suddenly became 7 humans scattered across impossible spatial coordinates. Its enhanced vision, evolved for precision hunting, couldn't reconcile the multiple images. The gravitational lensing effects made each image appear solid and real, complete with heat signatures and electromagnetic traces. The scout froze, threat displays cycling through confused patterns. Its pack communication organs pulsed frantically, but the interference field continued to block outgoing signals. Alone and sensory compromised, it made the decision that Marcus had predicted: direct assault on the most accessible target. It chose wrong. The kinetic interceptor activated the moment the Night Stalker committed to its attack vector. The railgun, projectile, no larger than Marcus's thumb but traveling at 3,000 meters per second, struck the creature's center mass. The impact didn't kill. Marcus had calculated the precise force needed to incapacitate without creating a death scent that would enrage the remaining pack. The scout collapsed, paralyzed but alive, its bioluminescent patches flickering in distress. Patterns. Marcus approached calmly, injecting a mild sedative that would keep the creature unconscious for several hours. Then he activated a beacon that would allow the pack to locate their scout after sunrise. Alive, unharmed, but marked with synthetic pheromones that would tell a very specific story. The chemical markers indicated that this territory was defended by something that could neutralize Night Stalkers without killing them, something that possessed both the power to dominate and the restraint to show mercy. In predator psychology, such displays commanded a respect deeper than simple fear. Marcus returned to his fire and his book, checking his sensor network. The remaining pack members, he counted 11 distinct heat signatures, had detected their scouts' distress signals and were approaching the perimeter. But their movement patterns had changed. The confident pack formation had dissolved into cautious individual approaches. They were no longer hunting. They were investigating. As the night deepened and Kepler 442b's 3 moons rose above the forest canopy, Marcus prepared for the main event. The scout had been reconnaissance. What came next would be the pack's full assessment of this new threat that had appeared in their territory. He smiled, turning another page. The night was still young. The pack's response came in waves, each more sophisticated than the last. Marcus tracked their approach through his sensor network, admiring their tactical coordination despite the communication interference. These creatures had survived millions of years of evolution by being adaptable, intelligent, and ruthlessly efficient. The first wave consisted of 3 juveniles, smaller, faster, more expendable members sent to test the defenses. They approached from different vectors simultaneously, their heat signatures weaving through the forest with practiced precision. One triggered the pitfall trap at the eastern approach, disappearing into paralytic fog with a surprised shriek. The other 2 immediately adapted, leaping between tree trunks to avoid ground-level hazards. They made it to the inner perimeter before Marcus's proximity sensors activated the electromagnetic burst system. The pulse disrupted their bioelectric navigation, sending them tumbling through the undergrowth in confused spirals. They retreated, chattering in high-frequency distress calls that Marcus's equipment faithfully recorded for later analysis. Wave 2 brought the adults, 5 mature night stalkers, each weighing over 800 kilograms, began a coordinated assault pattern that demonstrated their species' apex predator status. They moved in perfect synchronization, approaching from cardinal points while the 5th remained hidden as tactical reserve. Their bioluminescent threat displays had shifted to active hunting patterns, deep crimsons and violent purples that indicated lethal intent. The eastern adult triggered Marcus's most elegant trap, a gravity snare using concentrated exotic matter, deposits. The creature found itself suspended 3 meters in the air, held by gravitational fields that intensified with resistance. Its struggles only tightened the invisible bonds, while synthetic pheromone dispensers marked it with claimed kill scents that would deter pack interference. The northern approach adult encountered the chemical maze Marcus had constructed using local plant toxins. Each step released airborne compounds that scrambled olfactory processing, creating phantom scent trails and false prey signatures. The Night Stalker began chasing illusions, pursuing chemical ghosts through increasingly erratic patterns until it collapsed from sensory overload. The western and southern adults pressed their attack simultaneously, reaching the inner defensive ring where kinetic interceptors waited. But these weren't the simple, incapacitating rounds Marcus had used on the Scout. These projectiles carried payloads, nets woven from high-tensile synthetic fibers that would expand on impact and contract around the target. Both creatures found themselves suddenly entangled, their mobility compromised but their pride intact. Marcus had been careful to avoid inflicting visible wounds that might trigger berserker responses in the remaining pack members. The reserve adult, observing the systematic neutralization of its packmates, made a decision that elevated Marcus's respect for Night Stalker intelligence. Instead of attacking or retreating, it began a complex dominance display. The creature reared to its full height, threat chromatophores cycling through patterns Marcus recognized from his behavioral studies. This wasn't aggression, it was communication. The Night Stalker was attempting to establish territorial boundaries, essentially offering a non-aggression pact. Marcus set down his book and stood slowly, making no sudden movements. The creature's electromagnetic field sensors would detect any hostile intent, so he projected calm confidence instead. From his supply pack, he retrieved a synthesized pheromone compound, not the territorial markers or distress signals he'd used in the traps, but something more sophisticated. The chemical message was complex: acknowledgement of the pack's strength, recognition of their territorial rights, and an offer of coexistence. The Night Stalker's bioluminescent displays shifted to confusion, then to what Marcus interpreted as cautious interest. For several minutes, human and apex predator regarded each other across the alien clearing. The creature's packmates remained, neutralized but unharmed, their distress calls growing fainter as the paralytic and entanglement systems took full effect. The message was clear. Marcus could have killed them all, but chose restraint instead. The lead Night Stalker made a decision that would reshape the territorial dynamics of this entire forest region. It backed away slowly, never breaking eye contact, then released a complex series of pheromone markers that Marcus's sensors identified as dangerous territory, avoid, combined with overtones of worthy adversary, respect. As the creature melted back into the forest shadows, Marcus began the process of releasing the captured pack members. Each one was treated with sedatives to prevent injury during recovery, marked with the same territorial boundary pheromones their leader had acknowledged, and provided with neutralizing agents for the various toxins they'd encountered. By dawn, all 7 Night Stalkers would awaken unharmed but thoroughly educated about the new reality in their hunting grounds. They would carry chemical messages that would spread through the entire regional population. This territory was defended by something that combined overwhelming tactical superiority with unprecedented mercy. Marcus returned to his fire as the first traces of dawn touched the horizon. His tablet showed all systems operational, defensive networks intact, and most importantly, comprehensive behavioral data on one of the galaxy's most feared predator species. The night had been a complete success. Part 5. Dawn's Vindication Peace. Twin suns of Kepler 442b painted the forest in brilliant oranges and golds as Commander Mitchell's rescue team approached Marcus's position. She'd spent the night monitoring his emergency beacon, watching for any sign of distress that never came. The relief in her voice was audible even through the comm static as his camp came into view. "Marcus, report status immediately," she called, her tactical team spreading into defensive positions around the clearing. Marcus looked up from his morning coffee, actual Earth coffee, carefully rationed from his personal supplies, and gestured toward the neat rows of equipment he was already packing. "Good morning, Sarah. Status is nominal. All objectives achieved, 0 casualties, and I've gathered enough behavioral data to revolutionize our understanding of Night Stalker pack dynamics." Veltar's serpentine form coiled through the underbrush, her chromatophores displaying the rapid color shifts that indicated extreme agitation. Impossible. The silence from this sector lasted the entire night cycle. No creature could survive 8 hours of Night Stalker hunting season without fortified barriers. "That's because there was no hunting," Marcus replied, showing her his tablet. Display. The screen showed a detailed map of the surrounding area, now marked with pheromone concentration readings and behavioral tracking data. The pack tested my defenses, acknowledged the territorial boundaries, and withdrew to alternative hunting grounds. No shots fired, no lives lost. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the expedition's xenobiologist, emerged from behind one of the massive Kepler trees, her scanner painting the area with diagnostic beams. "Commander, I'm reading residual traces of at least 7 distinct Night Stalker bioelectric signatures, but no blood markers or tissue fragments. How is that possible?" Marcus activated his holographic display, showing the night's events in 3-dimensional reconstruction. The tactical team watched in fascination as the sensor data revealed the entire encounter: the scouts' approach, the pack's coordinated assault, and the final territorial negotiation. "The key was understanding that Night Stalkers aren't mindless killing machines," Marcus explained, highlighting movement patterns on the display. They're sophisticated social predators with complex territorial behaviors. Once I demonstrated superior tactical capability combined with restraint, their pack leader recognized that coexistence was preferable to costly conflict. Commander Mitchell studied the data streams, her military experience interpreting the tactical implications. You're telling me you negotiated a non-aggression pact with apex predators using chemical warfare and electromagnetic manipulation? Chemical, communication, and defensive technology, Marcus corrected gently. The warfare aspect ended when they realized I could neutralize their entire pack without lethal force. At that point, it became a diplomatic exchange. Veltar's color patterns shifted to deep contemplation. The implications are unprecedented. If humans can establish territorial boundaries with Night Stalkers without permanent barrier installations, it changes everything about colonial expansion on this world. Over the next several hours, Marcus demonstrated his defensive systems for the scientific team. Each trap revealed layers of sophistication that impressed even Commander Mitchell's combat engineers. The gravity snares, kinetic interceptors, and chemical maze systems represented advances in adaptive defense technology that would have applications across dozens of colonial worlds. But the most significant discovery came when Veltar's long-range sensors detected movement at the forest perimeter. A group of juvenile Night Stalkers was approaching, not in hunting formation, but in what appeared to be investigative behavior. They're studying the area, Dr. Vasquez breathed, watching the creatures maintain careful distance while examining the pheromone markers Marcus had left. They're trying to understand what happened here. Marcus smiled, packing the last of his equipment. Learning behavior. The pack will share this information across their entire social network. Within a week, every Night Stalker in the region will know that this territory is defended by something that combines technological superiority with behavioral restraint. As the team prepared to return to the outpost, Commander Mitchell pulled Marcus aside. The Colonial Administration is going to want a full report on this methodology. If we can establish safe zones without massive infrastructure investment, already drafted, Marcus replied, patting his tablet. But Sarah, remember that this approach requires extensive preparation, detailed behavioral study, and perfect execution. It's not a simple solution. It's applied xenopsychology combined with adaptive engineering. The return journey to the outpost took them through areas that normally required heavy escort during daylight hours. But the forest seemed different now, still dangerous, still wild, but no longer hostile. Night Stalker scent markers along the trail confirmed what Marcus's sensors had detected. The local packs were actively avoiding the research team's movement corridor. That evening, as Kepler 442b's suns set once again over the alien landscape, Marcus stood on the outpost's observation deck watching the forest come alive with bioluminescent displays. Somewhere out there, apex predators that had terrorized 3 previous colonial expeditions were adapting their behavior patterns based on a single night's education in human ingenuity. Veltar joined him at the railing, her chromatophores now, displaying the steady blues and greens of respect. Human Marcus, your species continues to surprise us. Where we saw insurmountable danger, you saw what exactly? Marcus considered the question as the first Night Stalker calls echoed through. The darkening forest, not hunting cries this time, but territorial acknowledgments. I saw a puzzle, Veltar. Every threat is just a problem waiting for the right solution. Humans don't survive by being the strongest or fastest. We survive by being clever enough to turn any environment to our advantage. The alien forest stretched endlessly toward the horizon, beautiful and deadly and no longer quite so mysterious. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin working on defensive systems for the next colonial outpost, armed with data that would keep humans safe across a dozen worlds. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they learned, and they turned the impossible into the inevitable, one carefully planned night at a time. The end author's note. This story explores the classic HFY theme of human ingenuity triumphing over seemingly impossible odds, but with a focus on intelligence and preparation rather than raw strength or technology. Marcus Chen represents the human capacity for careful observation, adaptive problem-solving, and the wisdom to choose restraint over destruction when dealing with natural forces beyond our immediate understanding.